Abandoned and alone, she discovers an amazing forgotten ranch. What happened next will inspire you. Sarah stood at the threshold of her grandmother's ranch, heart racing as the memories clashed with reality. The expansive fields, once teeming with life and the laughter of children, now lay overgrown and silent. A heavy weight sat in her chest, twisting with the suffocating reminders of abandonment. Her entire family had uprooted and left, leaving her to grapple with her dreams and debts alone. She was supposed to be a veterinarian, yet here she was, tangled in the expectations of a legacy that felt out of reach in this derelict landscape. For hours, she wandered through wild grass and rusted fences, her thoughts spiraling. Can I truly restore this place? Doubts clawed at her mind as she recalled the whispers from the townsfolk. Just another millennial failure, they murmured. The dangerous cocktail of self-doubt and grief brewed within her like an impending storm. But she couldn't shake off the yearning to prove herself. That urge made her heart ache. All she wanted was a chance to honor her grandmother's legacy, but the fear of public judgment kept her frozen. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As she meandered through the labyrinth of memories, she stumbled upon a hidden barn, its door creaking in protest. Inside, the air was thick with dust and nostalgia. The sight of her grandmother's veterinary tools and journals sent waves of warmth through Sarah's veins. Each tool echoed with stories of compassion and determination, a stark contrast to the perception she faced outside. How could she muster the courage to restore not just the ranch, but her own sense of self? The gleaming journals offered a flicker of hope, yet the town's scorn loomed large. The push from wealthy neighbors, including the scheming Mrs. Thompson, ignited a smoldering defiance within Sarah. Abandonment was no longer the only weight she bore. It was the pressure of the community's collective gaze, their whispers chasing her as she navigated the debris of her former dreams. Desperation clawed at her as she internalized the bitter sting of rejection. She hesitated. What if they were right? What if she couldn't pull this off? In a moment of maximum anguish, the walls felt as if they were closing in, suffocating her aspirations under the crushing weight of judgment. But then she remembered her grandmother's laughter, the promise of love that had once lived within these walls. Still, a storm brewed within her. An impending confrontation with Mrs. Thompson could unravel everything. Would exposing their connection upend her plans, or give her the power to reclaim her narrative? Surrounded by fading memories and the intoxicating promise of new beginnings, Sarah stood at a crossroads, poised to battle not just the town's expectations, but also her own insecurities. In the depths of the barn, she clutched the journals tightly, wrestling with the fear of failure that loomed larger than any obstacle. Would she dare to fight for her dreams against the tide of doubt? Or would she surrender to the belief that she was just another forgotten dreamer, destined to remain abandoned? The air in the barn grew heavier with each passing moment, a cloying mixture of nostalgia and anxiety. Sarah tightened her grip on her grandmother's journals, a combination of reverence and determination surging through her. The mere thought of her inheritance, not simply in property but in legacy, urged her to act. She needed to harness the wisdom trapped within these pages. There had to be a plan hidden amongst her grandmother's meticulous notes. As she flipped through the aged pages, snippets of her grandmother's life poured out. Cases of animals treated, the names of families helped, and notes on best practices in veterinary medicine. With each entry, a realization blossomed. This ranch wasn't just a relic. It was a beacon of hope waiting to be reinvigorated. It had once facilitated healing, and perhaps it could do so again, but the task wouldn't be easy. Sarah's mind raced. Could she truly breathe life back into this forgotten place? Each journal entry felt like an echo of her grandmother's resilient spirit, whispering encouragement into the silence. What would Grandma do? She asked herself, and the answer stoked the embers of her determination. Gran would face challenges head-on, no matter how formidable they appeared. Emboldened, Sarah stepped out of the barn and into the fading daylight. She scanned the ranch, envisioning the animals she could bring back, the children she could teach about empathy through care. Yet, the town's critical eyes loomed large. Every glance from Mrs. Thompson felt like a silent accusation, as if the wealthy widow could smell fear. They would not understand her mission, and that realization made her pulse quicken. Her feet moved of their own accord, drawn to the old corral where half-collapsed fences stood silently like sentinels of the past. She took a deep breath, the cool air filling her lungs. Restoration would take more than desire. It would demand a plan, resources, and a little bravery. How could she raise funds without inviting the town's scorn? She recalled the bustling community that once surrounded this ranch. Perhaps there were still bonds to be forged, alliances to be formed. Determined to start small, she decided to host an open barn day, inviting neighbors for a glimpse into the ranch's past. It would allow her to share her grandmother's story and show her commitment to revitalizing the place. But she also needed to prepare for Mrs. Thompson's inevitable critique. What if the wealthy neighbor tried to sabotage her efforts? She needed an ally, someone from the town who valued the legacy of the ranch, someone who could see past the judgments and obnoxious standards imposed by the affluent. That thought lingered in Sarah's mind as she walked back inside to gather her strength, the journals now a burning motivation. Her grandmother's legacy would not slip away like the dust through her fingers. It was time to take control of her narrative, to carve out a space for herself within the history of this ranch, and the whispers of the townsfolk would be silenced by her resolve. As night settled and shadows deepened, Sarah sat amidst the remnants of her family's past, her heart steadying with newfound purpose. She would reclaim this place, one piece at a time, and prepare for the confrontation that awaited with Mrs. Thompson. The challenge was clear, a harbinger of both transformable potential and inevitable conflict. Could she withstand the friction, or would fear dictate her decisions yet again? A flicker of doubt brushed against her resolve, demanding to be addressed. If she truly wanted to restore her grandmother's legacy and the ranch, she'd have to face more than just the town's opinions. It was time to confront her own fears, and the moment of truth was rapidly approaching. Would she take the plunge before it was too late, or would hesitation pull her back into the shadows of doubt? The morning sun broke through the cracked barn windows, casting a warm glow across the dusty floor. Sarah awoke with a renewed sense of purpose, her mind racing with strategies for the open barn day. The day ahead would not only be about showing the community what the ranch could become, but also about revealing a piece of her grandmother's heart, and maybe even finding the ally she so desperately sought. She moved through the ranch with a precise focus. The creaking floorboards underfoot felt more familiar now, part of a dance she was learning to embrace. Sarah knew she needed to clean up the barn, to make it presentable, but her gaze drifted to a weathered toolbox resting on a shelf. It reminded her of the time she had quietly watched her grandmother tinker with broken tools, an expression of contentment etched on her face. It was here that Sarah's self-doubt began to twist into determination. In the glaring light of the late morning sun, Sarah grabbed a pair of gloves and set to work. Each swept cobweb, each reorganized shelf breathed new life into the once vibrant space. She reveled in the act of creation, feeling the weight of her grandmother's legacy behind her. Each journal entry became a guide, illuminating not just the past, but highlighting the grit and determination needed for the future. However, as she rummaged through the toolbox, she stumbled upon a collection of faded photographs. They depicted children, animals, the barn filled with laughter and life. It struck her like a bolt of lightning, the hearts of families who had once thrived on this land. Could she bring that joy back? A sudden clarity washed over her as Sarah realized that she was not merely restoring a ranch. She was restoring a sanctuary where connections were forged and lives changed. Only then would empathy blossom anew. By evening, the barn was almost unrecognizable, transformed from a den of neglect to a lively tableau ready for visitors. Yet her pulse quickened at the thought of Mr. Thompson weighing her every move. The wealthy widow was not just an obstacle, she embodied every ingrained fear Sarah had about failure and being judged. As dusk settled, drawing silhouettes against the horizon, Sarah contemplated her strategy. She would need to address the skepticism head-on during open barn day. Perhaps she could frame Mrs. Thompson's disdain as fuel for her passion, rather than an impediment to her success. She couldn't afford to hide. Vulnerability might be her greatest strength. The following day would be pivotal, not just for the ranch, but for Sarah herself. She had already decided to reach out to her childhood friend, Mark, who had often fished along the creek and shared her grandmother's love for animals. Mark had always appreciated the ranch's legacy and might serve as a bridge between her vision and the community. With a sense of camaraderie rekindled, Sarah's phone call opened a window of possibility. "Sarah, I've been wondering when you'd get back to this place," he said, his voice a mix of surprise and relief. It felt good to connect once more, and as they chatted, she could almost hear her grandmother's laughter echoing beneath the surface. Yet, amidst these feelings of hope, shadows of doubt lingered at the edges of her consciousness. Was she truly ready? How would she handle the first questioning looks from Mrs. Thompson and the town's elite? Angela, her demanding rival, always waiting to point out flaws, seemed like an omnipresent specter. As Sarah hung up the phone, a knot tightened in her stomach. The upcoming barn day represented more than just an event. It symbolized a confrontation with her own identity, her fears, and the compelling desire to reclaim her family's legacy. The thought was invigorating and terrifying all at once. Her grandmother's voice seemed to whisper from the journal, coaxing her to rise above, to allow courage to drown out insecurity. But even now, as she set her plans in motion, fear would not remain silent. The looming specter of judgment awaited. The moment of truth was coming, and she felt every second tick away. Would she embrace the upcoming encounter, a path toward rejuvenation, or allow insecurities to assert control? Her heart raced. A decision loomed before her like an unfinished canvas. And with that, Sarah locked the barn doors, once more facing the uncertainties ahead. Would opening the barn prove her resilience or rip open her vulnerabilities? The time had come to confront the judgments of Mrs. Thompson, and she had to ask herself, how far was she willing to go to protect her grandmother's legacy? As dawn's fragile light crept into the barn, Sarah found herself wrapped in a cocoon of anticipation. Today was not just about the barn, it was about her spirit, a chance to redefine herself in the eyes of the people who knew her past and shaped the fabric of her community. The weight of expectation pressed heavily against her chest, while the faint sounds of birds calling outside served as a reminder of the life that thrived beyond the wooden doors. She stood in front of her grandmother's journal, a tangible piece of the legacy she aimed to resurrect. There was no time for self-doubt. Determination pulsed through her veins, igniting a spark that prompted her to linger over the journal's open pages. Each careful stroke of the pen echoed wisdom, how her grandmother had overcome trials, transforming fear into resilience. It crystallized a thought. Today was a moment not meant for hesitation, but for demonstrating the strength she had gleaned from her lineage. With a deep breath, Sarah strategized her entrance to the barn. She envisioned the eager faces of community members, envisioned their reactions as they stepped into the cultivated warmth she had infused into this space. But her heart drummed a relentless reminder. Mrs. Thompson was observing, and so was Angela. The specter of criticism loomed as large in her mind as the barn itself. Hours sped by as Sarah adjusted the layout one last time, each tiny tweak infused with the hope that it held the power to draw in skeptics. She placed freshly cut flowers on the table, testament to the love that kindled the barn's revival. In every corner, in every bustling moment, she infused a piece of her grandmother's spirit. As she stood back, surveying her work, uncertainty tilted her balance. Would this be enough to showcase her vision? Each passing minute felt almost torturous as people began to trickle in. Sarah's heart raced, not just from anticipation, but from the looming prospect of judgment. As she greeted familiar faces, she sensed a mixture of intrigue and skepticism. A whisper of doubt crept back into her mind as she spotted Mrs. Thompson, her icy demeanor seemingly penetrating. Sarah forced herself to respond with warmth, drawing strength from the determination that surged within her. And then there was Mark. With his easygoing smile, he blended seamlessly with the other visitors, unearthing a sense of shared history that began to settle Sarah's nerves. It was as if they were both stewards of this place, connected by moments forged in laughter and shared dreams of what the ranch could represent. In every interaction, she understood that this day was not solely for her. It was for every person who shared a memory of this land. When Mark approached her, his voice steady and encouragement evident, she felt buoyed by a welcome sense of solidarity. "You've done an incredible job here, Sarah. This feels like home again," he remarked, his words planting seeds of possibility in the fertile ground of her aspirations. But immediately, the weight of Mrs. Thompson's critical gaze reminded her that encouragement could swiftly be countered by skepticism. Throughout the day, the mostly positive reactions mixed with lingering unease. Sarah sensed the growing rumbles of discussion and deliberation. But then she heard it. A specific voice cutting through the murmur. Angela was dissecting every imperfection, drawing attention to areas of the barn that might remain untidy or thoughts that seemed austere. The tension knotted in Sarah's stomach again. Was she truly capable of transforming this barn and the ranch's reputation? The risks she had undertaken could unravel faster than they had come together if doubt was given free rein. "Sarah, don't let her get to you. Remember why you're here," Mark said, noticing her momentary retreat into hesitance. His presence anchored her, and she suddenly recognized that the battle within was a reflection of external conflicts that needed to be confronted. With shoulders squared and a resolve seasoned with both trepidation and newfound courage, Sarah stepped toward Angela. It was time to disrupt the narrative being propagated. Could she share her truth? Could her vulnerability forge the connection needed to transform criticisms into understanding? Standing face to face with Angela, Sarah felt the air crackle with tension. "I appreciate your feedback," she began, leaning into her vulnerability. "But I'm here to grow and to show not just what this ranch has been, but what it can become." As she spoke, she felt a shift within herself, a release of the doubts she had clung to for far too long. Would this be the moment that defined her reclamation of the ranch? The psychological clash ignited a fire in Sarah that had not burned so fiercely before. And just as Angela's response loomed on the horizon, Sarah felt a tremor of anticipation. What would come next? The courage surged, igniting every fiber within her. This confrontation, the heart of her journey, was about to unfold, and she was ready to embrace it. Repercussions be damned. The tension hung thick between Sarah and Angela, an invisible barrier vibrating with unspoken words. Angela's expression hardened, her lips pursed in a way that suggested a carefully curated rebuttal. Sarah's pulse quickened, and she could almost hear her grandmother's voice whispering encouragement, urging her to stand firm. This was not just about the barn. It was about forging her identity. "Grow!" Angela scoffed, crossing her arms. "This place needs more than just your vision. It requires a practical plan. What you see as potential, I see as mere wishful thinking." Each of Angela's words felt like daggers, yet rather than allowing them to pierce through her resolve, they fanned the flames of Sarah's determination. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to remain calm. A deep breath steadied her. "In every challenge lies an opportunity," she replied, her voice steady. "And I choose to embrace it. This barn may not look perfect now, but it represents something bigger, hope and a future." Angela raised an eyebrow, but Sarah noticed a flicker of uncertainty behind her otherwise guarded facade. Was that doubt? Harnessing this insight, Sarah decided to anchor her next words in authenticity. "I understand the importance of practicality, but I believe this transformation requires a vision first. It requires heart." The slight quiver in Angela's stance suggested that her words were penetrating deeper than she anticipated. The murmurs of the crowd faded momentarily as Sarah's conviction resonated, enveloping her in a guiding clarity. For a moment, she felt free, liberated from the shackles of expectation, and took a bold step forward. "I invite you, Angela, to join me on this journey. Help me focus on the practicalities I may overlook. Together we can reshape this place, unearthing its potential." Silence enveloped them, with only the distant rustle of wind through the barn's open doors as a backdrop. Angela's expression softened, if only for an instant, as the crowd pondered the unexpected invitation. Sarah dared to hope that she had broken through. Mark stepped in, sensing an opportunity to mediate. "Sarah has a point. This barn represents our collective effort, the memories and aspirations we all share. A partnership might just be the way to lift this place up together." His voice carried warmth layered with sincerity, and for a moment it felt like the air became lighter. With a flicker of surprise, Sarah noted a gradual shift among the onlookers. Skepticism met curiosity as conversations began to ripple outward. It was a small victory, but one that filled her with renewed hope. Amidst the doubts and fears, Sarah had taken courageous strides toward building alliances, creating a foundation not merely out of bricks and wood, but from shared ambitions. Then, like the clouds parting after a storm, she noticed a few heads nodding in agreement. It was a subtle movement, a sign that perhaps vulnerability had the power to bridge divides. Sarah stood a bit taller, her heart beating steadily with a newfound vigor. But just as the horizon appeared to brighten, a sharp voice sliced through the rising optimism. "Hope is nice, Sarah, but dreams don't build barns. It takes hard work and grit, a reality you seem to overlook." Angela shot back, her critical demeanor returning. The setback was immediate, and Sarah's stomach sank. How could one moment of openness unravel so quickly? The challenge was palpable. This was not merely about the barn anymore. It was about her resolve, her capacity to weather criticism while building connections. It prompted a whirlwind of emotions within her. Fear, frustration, but also a fierce determination. Could she convert Angela's harshness into motivation? Was she ready to harness this obstacle, to understand its purpose in her growth? Sarah held her ground, imbuing every ounce of her energy to project confidence rather than self-doubt. "Hard work is exactly what I'm prepared to deliver, Angela, but so is the belief that we can do this together. Let's face this challenge as partners." As she spoke, their eyes locked, and Sarah felt an ethereal pull. Was it competition, or the promise of collaboration? In Angela's gaze, she sensed a spark of possibility, perhaps the curator of change hidden beneath layers of skepticism. The room brimmed with electric anticipation as the crowd held its breath, waiting for a response. And as their confrontation shifted, a larger question loomed in the air. A storm of anxiety mingled with a burgeoning sense of unity. Would Angela relent? Would this clash lead to a new understanding, or dismantle Sarah's vision altogether? The stakes had never felt higher. Suddenly, it dawned on Sarah that this was not just about reclaiming the barn. It demanded seizing her identity and belief in herself. This confrontation had become a crucial moment, with potential just waiting to be unleashed. But in that self-realization lay a new predicament. How would she navigate her own transformation? The voice within urging her forward while the voice of doubt attempted to drown it out. The journey ahead promised both turbulence and triumph, igniting a determination that demanded examination. As the weight of those choices settled upon her, she understood the path forward was murky. The time had come to confront not just Angela, but the imprints of fear that ensnared her spirit. Would she find her strength to fortify not just the barn, but an indomitable self? Sarah took a deep breath, heart pounding with potential, ready to embrace the unfolding challenge. It was time to break through the shadows of doubt and truly understand everything that lay at stake. The heat of the moment settled like a tangible presence, and Sarah's heart thudded in her chest, drowning out the murmur of the crowd. She refused to back down. A silent roar of determination surged within her. The thrill of confronting Angela was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. How could she turn this moment into a catalyst for personal growth? Angela's skeptical gaze bore into her, each second stretching into eternity, as the answer hung between them, heavy with expectation. It occurred to Sarah that this was not just a confrontation, but a pivotal opportunity to redefine the way she approached challenges in her life. How often had she avoided difficult conversations, believing harmony was preferable to conflict? "Angela," Sarah began, her voice firm yet calm, "I acknowledge the work ahead of us is significant, but I can't do this alone. I'm asking for your insight, your expertise. Let's not be adversaries. Let's create something remarkable together." Every word felt like a step onto a precarious precipice. Would Angela dismiss her once again, or dare to step into this partnership? The inner turmoil of longing for approval collided with the fear of rejection as Angela studied her, seemingly weighing her next words with the gravity of the moment. To Sarah's surprise, she saw a flicker of contemplation in Angela's eyes. It was a slow spark of recognition that they were, at their core, driven by a shared passion for this barn. The realization ignited something within Sarah. Breaking down barriers might require more than just courage. It could demand empathy and vulnerability. Angela's lips curled slightly, hinting at surrender. "Fine, I'll consider your proposal," she said, although the challenge still lingered in her tone. "But you need to demonstrate that you understand the hard work it takes to realize this vision." It was a tenuous truce, but it was enough to shift the tides of doubt that had captured Sarah's mind for so long. A part of her believed that if she could encourage Angela to witness her commitment firsthand, it would not only validate her vision but fortify her own sense of purpose. In the afterglow of this tentative accord, the crowd's energy swelled, and Sarah sensed newfound solidarity among them. The whispers of encouragement ignited tiny flames of hope that danced in her heart, replacing the insecurity that had long burdened her. Yet, as Angela walked away, a new inner conflict began to brew. Sarah had achieved a small victory, but it was only the beginning. How would she transform her vision into practical steps, proving to herself and to others that her faith in this project wasn't mere idealism? The enormity of the task ahead was daunting, each aspect demanding diligence and grit. This reflection led to questions swirling in her mind. What specific actions could she take to show her commitment? How could she break down the walls that had formed around Angela, solidifying their tentative alliance? Determined to act, Sarah decided to create a plan, one that would highlight both her vision and appreciation for hard work. She envisioned a day where every member of the community would gather, throwing themselves into the project as a united team, working hands-on to breathe life into the barn. But could she lead such an initiative? Could she inspire others to share in her commitment? With a clear resolve, she set to work, forming an outline of tasks layered with actionable steps, researching barn renovations, networking with local craftsmen, and organizing volunteers. The more concrete she made her vision, the more tangible her confidence became. This was about seizing her identity and turning this challenge into an avenue for her growth. Yet, amidst this surge of productivity, a shadow loomed in the back of her mind. What if her efforts faltered? What if doubts resurfaced, both from within and from Angela? Each step felt like venturing into uncharted waters fraught with uncertainty. As Sarah nailed down her plan, a realization dawned. Her self-worth should not hinge on validation from others, no matter how crucial their approval seemed. This internal dialogue challenged her belief that success was dictated by external measures, setting off another wave of self-discovery. With a mixture of excitement and apprehension, Sarah looked ahead to the looming task, ready to seize her narrative. But just as her resolve swelled, an unexpected reflection cut through her thoughts. What if the very transformation she sought meant confronting her own deepest doubts? The realization hit her. The real barn she needed to rebuild was not just the physical structure, but the very essence of who she was becoming. As she prepared to put her plan into action, a rush of uncertainty gripped her. How far could she push herself before reaching the breaking point? It was time to step beyond the comfort of theoretical ideas into the unpredictable realm of execution. In that moment, Sarah felt a chaotic pulse of fear mixed with anticipation. She had begun this journey toward reclaiming the barn as a metaphor for her own life, but now the stakes felt infinitely higher. Would she transform into the leader she envisioned, or would she falter beneath her own weight? As she stood at the threshold of her newfound commitment, ready to embrace the forthcoming challenges, one thought rang clear. The moment had come to confront not just the barn, but the essence of her character. How would she navigate this path and emerge on the other side, not only successful in her endeavors but enriched by the journey? The next chapter of Sarah's growth was ready to unfurl, and it promised to take her further than she ever anticipated. With each passing moment, Sarah felt the weight of potential pressing against her shoulders. The barn loomed large in her mind, its dilapidated structure embodying her fears and unfulfilled aspirations. Yet it was more than just timber and nails. It was a bridge to her future. The thought ignited a flicker of resolve within her as she took the first concrete steps toward what she envisioned. Determined to understand the extensive work required, Sarah dove into research. Days turned into evenings spent poring over blueprints and renovation guidelines. She dissected materials needed, calculated costs, and compiled task lists, the quiet hum of her laptop echoing her fervor. Each keystroke served not just to build a plan, but to sculpt her identity as a leader, an identity she desperately craved. But as her knowledge expanded, an unexpected obstacle surfaced within her psyche. She envisioned Angela observing her missteps, ready to point out each flaw in her approach. Would she truly see the dedication behind Sarah's planning, or merely note the inadequacies? The specter of judgment thrived in her mind, fueling self-doubt which crept into her thoughts uninvited. "Focus, Sarah," she whispered to herself, reminding her that true leadership demanded resilience in the face of criticism. The transformative journey was about more than impressing Angela. It revolved around her self-legitimacy, an affirmation that her vision held merit. Yet with each step forward, she felt the paralysis of perfectionism tightening its grip. The oppressive urge to present a faultless execution loomed. What if the reality fell short of her aspirations? Responding to this internal chaos, Sarah scheduled a meeting with a seasoned local contractor who had experience with similar projects. The decision seemed small, but for her, it was monumental. She needed a mentor, someone who could validate her efforts and illuminate the path ahead. The combination of anxiety and excitement coursed through her as she approached this new challenge. That afternoon, as she shared her vision and plans with the contractor, she sensed a shift in her capability to articulate her ideas. The man listened intently, nodding as she relayed each detail. When she finished speaking, silence hung between them for a heartbeat, as if he were weighing not just her words but her commitment. "You have vision," he finally said, his voice steady. "Many don't take that first step. But remember, the barn won't just rise from a blueprint. You'll need to roll up your sleeves, get your hands dirty." His words echoed the very sentiment Angela had conveyed, but it resonated differently coming from someone with experience. The contractor's encouragement ignited something within her, a spark of affirmation mingled with ambition. It was more than just validation. It was the understanding that her dreams were achievable through unflinching action. She made a commitment to approach the project not just with planning, but with authentic effort, embracing the mess and complexity of real growth. As they delved into the specifics, the conversation shifted from ideas to tangible work. He outlined what materials could withstand the elements, the safest ways to conduct renovations, and where to find help. Each nugget of information acted as scaffolding for her burgeoning belief in her capabilities. The meeting ended, but not before he extended an offer to guide her throughout the process. The exhilaration of this newfound partnership collided with an unsettling fear. What if she couldn't translate this momentum into her reality? The shadow of her inadequacies loomed once more, a reminder of how easy it was to slip back into doubt. Yet, as she drove home, a flame of determination flared within her. She had broken the cycle of avoidance. She had reached out, faced her fears, and here lay the tangible proof that growth was unfolding. The road ahead promised chaos and challenges, but for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt equipped to navigate them. She began forging a list of tasks with her contractor's suggestions intertwined, a practical embodiment of her commitment. It transformed into an anchor point, one that would ground her efforts amidst the brewing storm of expectations and self-discovery. Still, in those quiet moments alone, the whispers of doubt echoed, taunting her with the specter of failure. Was she ready to confront the realities of the project she had envisioned so boldly? What if she lost herself amidst the very process she sought to embrace? As the uncertainties mingled with unwavering determination, Sarah realized a deeper truth. The challenge before her was not merely the barn, but also her sense of self. In confronting this duality, she could either reaffirm her capabilities or confront her greatest fears. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows over the barn that awaited her touch. As Sarah parked her car beside the structure, a new revelation began to crystallize, reshaping her understanding of strength. Could this barn be the vessel for not just her aspirations, but also a reflection of her authentic self? Her heart raced, anticipation filling the air around her. The moment had come to take that next critical step. What awaited her in that decaying structure held the promise of either triumph or revelation. As she approached the barn, the question hung heavy. Would she walk away transformed, or would the weight of her fears anchor her in place? Stepping into the barn, Sarah was immediately enveloped by the scent of aged wood and lingering dust, a mixture that stirred a long-buried nostalgia. The beams overhead creaked softly as she moved deeper inside, each slight sound echoing her uncertainty. This empty space was both daunting and liberating, resonating with the duality of her journey, a blank canvas and a reminder of her hesitation. Determined to confront her fears, she pulled out her notepad and began taking in her surroundings. Flickering rays of sunlight sliced through the gaps in the siding, illuminating fragments of a life long forgotten. Her heart pounded as she scribbled down ideas for how she could repurpose the barn, a community space perhaps, or a workshop for artisans. Each stroke of her pencil felt like a promise to herself, affirming her right to dream big. But the doubts clawed at the edges of her determination, whispering that her visions held no substance. Where to even start? The walls were peeling, and the ground was littered with debris. Each time she thought about approaching her first task, the voice of doubt surged with new intensity. What if she was not cut out for this? What if her efforts were laughable in the eyes of those she hoped to impress? In a moment of irritability, she crumpled the paper and tossed it aside, hating the weakness that threatened to overwhelm her. Breathe, she reminded herself, kneeling to collect the scattered paper. Among the mess, she felt her fingers brush against a rough, weathered board. Curiosity piqued, she examined it closely and discovered faded markings underneath the grime. It was a map of sorts, a blueprint of sorts, showing various parts of the barn and their past uses. Sarah realized this pristine outline held knowledge, a history that could guide her renovation efforts. The revelation was a spark. Her perception shifted. Sarah sat cross-legged on the ground, absorbing the information with renewed zeal, allowing her excitement to overshadow her fear. She imagined each section coming alive, where artisanal markets could flourish and creative workshops could inspire others. The transformation wasn't only about the barn, it would be about her metamorphosis as a leader. She envisioned herself standing at the helm of a thriving community initiative, the very thing Angela had always championed. Yet the creeping thought returned. How would Angela react? Would she laugh? Would she see potential, or just a novice fumbling with the tools of her trade? Pushing the worries aside, Sarah stood, brushing off her pants. She pulled her phone from her pocket, knowing the next step involved action. She started drafting a social media post to rally support. After all, the path to reclaiming the barn was about building connections, reaching out, and allowing others to share in the vision she was beginning to fortify. As she prepared to hit send, her finger hovered over the button, the pressure tightening again in her chest. What if this backfired? What if no one cared? Then, remembering the contractor's words about getting her hands dirty, she exhaled slowly. With a deep breath, she pressed the button, unleashing a wave of vulnerability that felt exhilarating. In that moment, she recognized the power of community. She could not do this alone. The very act of asking others to share in her endeavor became her first tangible step toward leadership. Sarah stepped outside, the crisp evening air re-energizing her spirit. Her gaze traveled back to the barn. It stood steadfast, betraying none of the vulnerability she felt. Instead, it became like a sentinel over her new aspirations, a challenge to take head-on, rather than a relic of her past failures. With renewed vigor, she made a call to the contractor. Together, they would begin organizing the initial touch-ups needed to begin the transformation. The tension radiated through her as she recalled how far she had already come. She was rewriting her narrative, redefining not just the barn but herself. But all this daring optimism came with a price. As Sarah reflected on her intentions, a stark realization dawned. She needed to articulate what she truly wanted, not just for the barn, but for herself. In the throes of excitement, she could drift into a role dictated by expectations rather than her authentic desires. What lay ahead was not merely a renovation, but the delicate unearthing of who Sarah was meant to be. The stakes had transformed. It was now about her essence as much as it was about the barn. The next step emerged. She needed to confront her deepest fear, unveiling her vulnerabilities to those around her and embracing the risk of authenticity. As she set her goals, doubts lingered. Would uprooting her past help to solidify her future, or would this plunge expose her to deeper insecurities? Would she ultimately find a sense of belonging in those connections she hoped to cultivate? The flicker of fear twisted with excitement as she understood this was only the beginning of a much deeper journey. How would she navigate the realms of authenticity and leadership that awaited her just beyond the horizon? The sun bathed the barn in a soft golden light as Sarah returned the following morning. With her phone buzzing in her pocket, a steady reminder of the support system she had begun to foster, She leaned against the weathered doorframe, contemplating her next move. The map she had found now served as both a guide and a challenge. Its faded lines resonated with her own fears of inadequacy. She was no architect, but she could become a visionary. Today wouldn't merely be about sweeping away the dust or painting the walls. It had to be about defining who she would be, not just in the eyes of others but in her own self-reflection. Every moment spent in the barn thickened the air with anticipation, stirring a mix of hope and fear that crackled like electricity beneath her skin. She was standing at the precipice of her journey, and the stark contrast of past failures loomed behind her. Taking a deep breath, Sarah did the first thing that came to mind. She picked up a broom. Every swish of the bristles against the floor shone a little light on her delicate resolve. It felt empowering to transform this neglected space with her own hands. As she swept, a sense of ownership began to flourish within her, transforming doubt into determination. As she moved throughout the barn, each section began to reveal its potential. A rustic workshop, a cozy corner for creativity, a place where she could gather those like-minded spirits she had so desperately sought. But the specter of Angela's opinion still lurked at the back of her mind, provoking a tempest of anxiety. Would she see Sarah as capable, or just an amateur stumbling in the dark? The weight of her self-doubt gradually lifted as her physical labor focused her thoughts. Watching the debris disappear felt akin to shedding layers of disbelief. She wasn't just cleaning the barn, she was dismantling the wall she had built around her aspirations. As she paused to catch her breath, Sarah realized it wasn't enough to simply act. She also needed to cultivate belief in her capabilities. This time, when she returned to her phone, it was to draft a list of tasks, not just for the barn, but for herself. How could she build her confidence? What steps would make her feel both competent and authentic? She wrote down everything from workshops on leadership to self-help books that had always sparked her interest, ideas that buzzed around her mind like busy bees. With renewed energy flooding her, she typed out a message to Angela, inviting her to the barn for what she called a visioning session. It felt bold, this acting despite her fears, but it was a risk she was prepared to take. Would Angela scoff at her dreams, or would she offer that insight Sarah had always longed for? Her thumb hovered above the send button, doubt creeping back in. What if Angela's response dashed her hopes? But in that moment of hesitation, Sarah remembered her aim of authenticity. The sacrifice of her vulnerability was small compared to the reward of potentially realizing her dreams. Gritting her teeth, she hit send, each second stretching out like a small eternity as she awaited a response. As the day drifted on, the barn transformed into a canvas filled with Sarah's personal reflections, a testament to her growth that was palpable in the simple act of taking control. But the anticipation of Angela's reply gnawed at her. Would she find clarity and support, or encounter an unwelcome critique? As she swept the last corner, the barn stood transformed, but inside her, the battle for self-acceptance remained fierce. Even as the afternoon sun dipped low, Sarah felt excitement mingling with trepidation. She had taken the first steps towards a tangible future, yet shadows of uncertainty still loomed, whispering reminders of the tenuous journey ahead. The challenge was far from over. She needed to face not just outside expectations, but the voice within her that reminded her of previous failures. As the sky darkened, her phone vibrated. Angela had responded. Heart racing, Sarah opened the message, the breath caught in her throat. Would this moment validate her journey or expose her to new vulnerabilities? What lay ahead was the real test of her resilience and courage. The tension in the air quivered with potential as Sarah stared at Angela's reply. 2 simple words, "Count me in," seemed to dissolve the remnants of doubt that clouded her mind. This invitation from an unexpected ally provided the validation Sarah had long craved. She felt a surge of confidence course through her veins and a renewed sense of purpose envelop her. The upcoming visioning session had become more than just a meeting. It was the catalyst propelling her into a new reality. As Sarah prepared for Angela's arrival, each moment of anticipation rang with determination. She took time to lay out her notes, sketching ideas for the barn's future while recalling her grandmother's spirit, every vision infused with purpose and conviction. When Angela finally arrived, her demeanor was surprisingly open, free from the judgment Sarah had previously anticipated. The 2 women began to talk, and with every exchange, Sarah felt empowered. Angela's insights on practicality, combined with Sarah's imagination, began to meld into a powerful shared vision. Creating a community space here will be invaluable, Angela nodded as she examined the layouts. But we need a solid plan to attract interest and funding. We should consider local businesses and schools. They might be able to partner with us. Sarah listened intently, allowing each piece of advice to bolster the foundation she was building. Angela was no longer an obstacle in her path, but instead a gateway, bridging the gap between aspiration and action. In that small corner of the barn, they brainstormed. The initial apprehensions transformed into collaborative energy as their ideas unfolded like wildfire. Each pitch invigorated Sarah's spirit, creating an environment rich with optimism. A vision of art classes, animal care workshops, and community gatherings began to take shape. A revival not just of the barn, but of the entire legacy her grandmother had once cultivated. Yet, amidst the excitement, the question persisted. How would they overcome the skepticism of their town? Angela acknowledged that they needed to visibly demonstrate their commitment to the community before they could hope to garner support. Let's organize a community day to reveal our plans, Angela suggested. If we showcase what we have now and convey the potential this space holds, they won't be able to ignore it. The thought sent a rush of exhilaration through Sarah. It was the perfect way to solidify her newfound identity while drawing the community into her dream. Together, they mapped out ideas, utilizing the barn's history as their foundation, while inviting the people surrounding them to participate. Sarah could see it, a vibrant space alive with laughter, learning, and connection. As the weeks passed, they worked diligently, not just restoring the barn, but building back Sarah's self-esteem. With every board they replaced, she transformed. Her confidence burgeoned, validated by both Angela's guidance and the support emerging from the community. Familiar faces began to volunteer, old friends, neighbors, and even a few faces that had once whispered doubt. On the day of the community unveiling, the barn shimmered under the afternoon sun. The air buzzed with excited chatter, and as people began to filter in, Sarah's heart pounded with anticipation. They entered not just a structure, they stepped into the embodiment of hopes and dreams, a metamorphosis reflected in the barn's walls. As she watched families mingle, the joy she witnessed reaffirmed her belief in herself. She embraced this opportunity. This was not just about the barn's revival, but about reclaiming her identity and healing from the remnants of abandonment. The ghosts of doubt dissipated within the laughter exchanged, and for the first time, Sarah felt whole. The moment came to present her vision and all it encapsulated. Standing before an audience enraptured by her journey, transformed her anxiety into power. "This barn is our opportunity," she exclaimed, the passion evident in her voice. "Together, we can breathe life into this space, igniting creativity and nurturing our community." As the applause erupted, Sarah stood tall, witnessing the embodiment of her dreams. In that moment, she realized a profound truth. The ranch and her personal journey were intertwined. By unraveling her past insecurities, she had restored not only the barn, but also her sense of purpose. Later that night, surrounded by many she once thought were so far away, Sarah took a moment of reflection. The journey had demanded self-acceptance, collaboration, and above all, courage. Gone were the days of drowning in fears of judgment. She had written her narrative, stepping into the role of a capable leader. A leader who understood the value of vulnerability and strength. As Sarah gazed at the illuminated barn, she saw it not just as a building, but also as a testament to her resilience. The work ahead would surely continue to challenge her, but she knew she would embrace each struggle as a stepping stone toward personal and community growth. And just like that, Sarah had not only restored her grandmother's legacy, but had also forged her own path. One defined by authenticity, empowerment, and an unwavering belief in the transformative power of connection. With a heart brimming with gratitude and a newfound sense of belonging, Sarah was ready for whatever lay ahead. This was her true beginning, and she had emerged not just as a caretaker of the land, but as a beacon of hope for all who shared in this journey. Now, to embrace your own transformative journey and empower your aspirations, you need to subscribe to the channel now. Don't miss exclusive stories that resonate with personal growth and triumph. Leave a like to support our algorithm and share in experiences that inspire change. It's your comments and reactions that drive the discussion, and we can't wait to hear your thoughts. And finally, share this video with at least 5 friends who also seek inspiration and connection. Don't wait even one more second to spread the word. This is the moment to show your support for stories that uplift and motivate.